Deep beneath the world's most critical energy artery, a silent sphere of explosives waits in the dark. It is worth no more than a used motorcycle, but above it, the global economy is bleeding. Over 150 supertankers sit paralyzed outside the Strait of Hormuz, their engines cold, their crews staring at a stretch of water barely 21 nautical miles wide. 20% of the planet's crude oil is completely halted. The price of crude has violently surged past $100 a barrel, and war risk insurance premiums have skyrocketed to an astronomical $4 million per transit. Yet the most powerful naval force in human history sits in open water, absolutely refusing to escort a single commercial vessel through the passage. To understand this geopolitical tension, you must look at the trap. In late February 2026, the United States initiated Operation Epic Fury. The Strait of Hormuz is incredibly narrow, with a highly specific traffic separation scheme, leaving exactly 6 nautical miles of usable water. Navigating a massive supertanker through this space is like threading a building through a claustrophobic hallway. For 40 years, the adversary optimized their military positioning here, amassing thousands of fast-moving attack craft, suicide drones, and hidden coastal missile batteries. It was an asymmetrical defense strategy designed to overwhelm any fleet that entered. But the United States Navy never intended to step into the trap. They executed a masterclass in standoff strategy, fighting entirely from the void. American EA-18G Growlers flooded the adversary's integrated air defense network with precisely calculated digital noise. They forced a lethal mathematical dilemma onto the coastal radar operators. If they stayed silent, they were entirely blind. But if they turned on their radars to burn through the jamming, they painted a massive electromagnetic beacon on their own foreheads. Within seconds, anti-radiation missiles locked onto those exact emissions and completely dismantled the transmitter arrays. Next, the U.S. aimed for the adversary's logistical stomach. The thousands of fast-moving composite boats and aerial drones possessed a massive thermodynamic penalty. Pushing high speeds required immense fuel reserves, tethering the entire swarm to lumbering massive logistical hub ships like the converted tanker INS Makran. Utilizing Tomahawk cruise missiles and stealth fighters, the United States completely neutralized these floating logistical hubs from hundreds of miles away. Instantly, the umbilical cord was severed. The fast-moving vessels automatically stalled out, drifting lifelessly in the open ocean entirely out of fuel. The swarm was dismantled through sheer thermodynamic reality. The United States had successfully overcome 90% of the adversary's defense strategy. But in the unforgiving mathematics of maritime logistics, 90% is a failing grade. The remaining 10% consisted of hundreds of naval contact mines scattered across the shipping lanes, backed by mobile missile launchers hidden deep inside coastal mountain tunnels. You cannot neutralize a submerged naval mine with a supersonic cruise missile. It must be methodically located and safely dismantled one by one. In the late 20th century, a single low-cost contact mine severely compromised an American warship, requiring massive, complex repairs. If that exact same explosive detonates beneath an unarmored supertanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil, the consequences become apocalyptic. The entire power balance seemed gridlocked. If the U.S. sent slow-moving mine countermeasure ships into the corridor, they would be highly vulnerable to the hidden mountain launchers. The world assumed the U.S. Navy was paralyzed by a trap it could not mathematically solve. Suddenly, open-source satellite trackers detected an anomaly moving at extreme speed through the South China Sea. Was the USS Tripoli, an amphibious assault ship that defense analysts had previously dismissed as a deeply flawed experiment. When naval engineers built this vessel, they made a highly controversial decision to completely remove its traditional well deck. What they didn't realize was that removing the well deck unlocked a massive volume of internal space, transforming the USS Tripoli into a specialized pocket carrier capable of operating 20 F-35B stealth fighters simultaneously. The ship they labeled a mistake was rushing toward Hormuz, carrying stealth fighters and 2,500 elite Marines. This changed everything. The arrival of the Tripoli introduced an entirely new dimension to the strategic pressure. For decades, the adversary built their defenses to repel ships from the sea and bombers from the sky. But the Tripoli possesses no landing craft. Its marines project directly from the air. Utilizing helicopters and tilt-rotor aircraft, they bypassed the submerged explosives entirely and flew directly onto strategically vital islands and coastlines. They executed expeditionary advanced base operations, establishing temporary forward bases equipped with advanced radar arrays and long-range precision rocket systems. The Marines effectively built an impenetrable, multi-dimensional umbrella over the shipping corridor. Under this localized bubble of absolute supremacy, the slow-moving mine countermeasures ships could finally operate safely without the threat of coastal harassment. But the strategic pressure expanded far beyond the shoreline. The United States engineered a flawless geometric trap of their own. They deliberately dispersed massive supercarriers to 3 separate global choke points. The USS Abraham Lincoln held the Arabian Sea, the USS Gerald R. Ford secured the Red Sea, and the USS George H.W. Bush arrived in the eastern Mediterranean. This geometric positioning formed an inescapable perimeter. The adversary found their entire nation perfectly enclosed. The very mines they placed in the Strait of Hormuz to keep the United States out were now preventing their own commercial vessels from exporting a single drop of crude oil. Their economic lifeblood was severed by their own defense strategy. To finalize this absolute shift in the power balance, the United States executed a highly calculated maneuver on Karg Island. This 5-mile stretch of coral processes 90% of the adversary's crude oil exports. Utilizing B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, the U.S. meticulously neutralized over 90 military targets on the island, dismantling radar stations, missile bunkers, and naval mine storage facilities. But then they did something profoundly unsettling. They deliberately left the massive oil storage tanks, the loading jetties, and the pipelines completely untouched. This was the ultimate demonstration of geopolitical tension. By dismantling the island's defenses while leaving the critical revenue infrastructure standing, the United States communicated a chilling reality. They proved they possessed the capability to permanently eliminate the nation's primary economic engine at any absolute moment, yet chose to hold that potential energy over their heads. The adversary spent 40 years preparing for a naval confrontation, but what they didn't realize was that the U.S. never intended to step through the front door. They simply locked the gates from the outside, disabled the network, and fundamentally rewrote the rules of modern defense strategy.